Tom, thanks, man, for being here.
I know. Thanks for having me. What's up, everybody? How we doing? All right, cool. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I don't know how Raul feels about questions, but this, I think, would be a lot more powerful, actually, if sort of halfway through, if I open it up and see what you guys really care about and see if we can actually make some change today, which would be really extraordinary. I think the most important thing to understand about me, to really understand my story, is I am not a born entrepreneur. So you hear about the success that I had, that my partners and I built a company that didn't exist at one point, and then 5 years later was valued at over $1 billion. And it was extraordinary growth. But the thing that made it really interesting to me was that I knew I did not start with any entrepreneurial instincts whatsoever. And so my life became proof positive of a few things. One, that deep shame can actually become something utterly transformative, and that humans are the ultimate adaptation machine, and that we can grow and adapt and learn anything we want. And in the intro, I said one of the things that really is one of the most powerful and resonant things that resonates in my life the most, which is you can become anything you want, but it's going to require that you pay an extraordinary price. And the difference between the people who end up going on to be successful and those who don't is that some people just aren't willing to pay that price. And so my story really becomes a story of what happens when you're willing to pay a price, when you get so fed up with where your life is that you're willing to do anything within your code of ethics to go somewhere new. A lot of people in my life have doubted me. My own mother quietly assumed when I left for college that I was going to fail. Now, she was always my biggest cheerleader, but my mom basically kicked me out of the house when I was about to balk at going to college. I was really beginning to panic. I was worried about leaving. I was one of the only 2 people in my high school class to leave the state. And so right before I was supposed to leave, quite frankly, I was just freaking out. I was really nervous. I was scared. And she said, I'm not going to let you live a life of what if. You are going to go to school. And so I end up going. And then, ironically, my mom has spent every day since then trying to get me back. And so I was like, Mom, look, you're the reason that I left. I never would have left in the first place. I tried to chicken out. You wouldn't let me. So what gives? And she said, I always just assumed you were going to fail. And I thought, whoa, like that was a gift. Because by that point, by the time that she said that, I had had just this insane amount of worldly success. And so I had, growing up, this cheerleader, somebody who told me that I could go and do these things and help try to breathe that belief into me, even though she didn't actually have it. When I went to ask the man who would become my father-in-law for his blessing to marry his daughter, he said no. And I said, Sir, look, I understand what you see before you is a broke, undereducated kid from Tacoma. I got a 990 on my SATs. I took it twice. That was my combined score. But I'm telling you right now, I'm the most ambitious person you've ever met. And when I said it, I believed it. But here's the thing that my father-in-law and my own mother, 2 people that knew me very well, had accurately identified. I was not yet capable of becoming successful. That was the truth. And the thing when I tell people that story, they always think, oh yeah, man, you really proved those doubters wrong. But the reality is they doubted me because they were right. They had accurately identified my skill set. My skill set was weak. My skill set was lacking. I was not yet able to do the things that I wanted to do. I was what I call an empty dreamer. I live in absolute crushing fear of being an empty dreamer. And when I meet people who are empty dreamers, it is heartbreaking because you know they want it. It's not like they're aimless. It's not like they're bad people, but they don't have the skill set that's going to see them through. And so when I left my father-in-law's house and I went back to my wife, I entered one of the darkest periods of my life. The person who was then my fiance, now my wife, was working and I was not. And I would lay in bed 3 to 4 hours a day, every day, because I couldn't get the energy or the discipline to get out of bed. Now, this is the guy, flash forward 15 years later, has a $1 billion company, 3,000 employees, doing things that he never imagined he was going to be able to do. But 15 years before that, I could not get out of bed. Now, think about the transition you have to go on from going from not being able to get out of bed. The same person, 15 years later, is able to marshal the resources of 3,000 people, get them pointed in the same direction, work an inhuman number of hours because I know exactly what I'm working for, and by that point, I have finally built the one skill set that matters: drive. I was no longer an empty dreamer. I had developed the drive to acquire skills. And this is the fascinating thing about skills. You don't go to school to check a box. You don't read a book to check a box. You don't learn something new to check a box. You don't do it to impress somebody. You do it very simply because it allows you to do something other people can't do. Like, really think about that. To me, the most powerful example of what skill acquisition really is, look at this building. Most of us, unless we have an architect, couldn't build this. We wouldn't even know where to begin. And thusly, this building would never come into existence, and we would not be gathered here in this place, or the sound equipment, the stage. All of these things were created by people who had to learn something. They had to be disciplined enough to go from not understanding something to being able to understand it well enough to execute against it. And it's that executing against dreams that will change your life. It is not the dream itself. And that, is my mission in life, to get people to understand. 1, it's not enough to dream. And 2, you can learn those skills. And once you have those skills, you can create. Once you can create, you can shape your life. And that's what it's about. People slide into depression because they don't think they can create the life they want. They feel that they're beholden to someone else, that there's some invisible game being played that they don't understand, that they're at the mercy of rules to which they're not privy to. But the reality is, the only rule that most people are not privy to is the following: humans are the ultimate adaptation machine. Darwin is often misquoted as saying that it's the strongest of the survival that wins. He actually never said that. What he did say was, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but rather the most adaptive to change. The reason that humans are the ultimate apex predator, the reason that you can find us anywhere in the world, is not because we have stronger muscles. It is not because we have sharper teeth. It's not because we are faster. It is simply because we can adapt more rapidly to a changing environment. Once you understand that you have that innate ability, then you can accept one fundamental truth. You ready? You're hopelessly average. You are not special. You're just like everyone else. And yay, because that means all you have to believe about yourself is that you can change, that it is in your fundamental nature to grow and get better, that we all inside of us have this deep desire to get better. And that's why I laid in bed with shame every day. Because in me was a desire. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going to give me that feeling that I wanted of being alive, of being in control, of doing something that made me proud of myself. I hadn't earned credibility with myself. I didn't believe in myself. So it didn't matter whether other people believed in me or not. The truth was, I didn't believe in myself. And I didn't believe in myself because I didn't have any right to believe in myself. I had not done something worthy of self-belief. So as I lay there every day in bed, ashamed of myself because I was not doing anything with my potential, I was not pushing myself, I wasn't doing the hard things, I wasn't adapting, I wasn't growing, and thusly I wasn't tapping into that reservoir of energy that I'll call fulfillment. Now, fulfillment comes from doing the hard things. It comes from beginning to transform yourself, of having a vision for what you want to do with your life, and then knowing every day that you're actually taking those steps to get the skills that you need to transform. So my wife had one ask of me at that period: have my lunch ready when I come home on my lunch break. And it was getting to the point where I would have to race downstairs and quickly slap something together because I would lay in bed so long that I ran the danger of not having her lunch ready when she got home. That's the same guy that ends up becoming an Inc. 500 entrepreneur. The only difference, I didn't get any smarter. I didn't get any new raw ability. I didn't get better genetics. I simply upgraded one thing, my mindset. I began to believe different things about myself. At this point in my life, it was such a dark period. I started reading about the brain, and I wanted to understand what the nature of the mind was. And at the time, this is the late 90s when I first started reading about it, at the time, it was hotly debated as to whether or not you could learn new tricks, right? Can an old dog learn new tricks? And people were saying, nope, you're born with the number of neurons that you're born with, and that's it. Every time you have a beer, you're knocking 10,000 out, and it's just a steady decline until you slide into the grave. That's what people were talking about. And then there was another group of people that said, no, actually, you're forming new neurons every day. There's this whole thing called brain plasticity. Your brain will actually rewire based on your own thoughts. Give it up to that. A man named Norman Doidge wrote a book called The Brain That Heals Itself. Think about this organ for a second. The organ itself, by thinking, can actually change its physical structure. And if you've ever seen footage of the little neurons and axes moving and looking for each other and coming together and reconnecting and then getting wrapped in what's called myelin, it's a fatty tissue that allows for the electrical impulses to travel more rapidly and easier. And because the brain is desperate for caloric efficiency, it always does that which is easiest. The thing that becomes easiest is the thing you repeat. So if you repeat to yourself that you're no good, that you're worse than other people, that you'll never be able to do it, then that's going to be what becomes easy for you to think. That's how the brain works. That's why if you practice something, you get better at it. Now, most people practice thinking really lame stuff about themselves. They think negative stuff all day long. They focus on their failures. They focus on the things that they didn't do well. And so that's what hardwires. They focus on all the ways that it could go wrong. I always tell people, stop rehearsing the failure and stop rehearsing it under the guise of I just want to be ready. I want to have a backup plan. Well, the problem is what you're going through over and over and over is how things are going to go wrong. It is far better for you to put your energy into how to make sure that they go right. Then you're rehearsing over and over and over. You don't just think about the 1,000 ways that a building could fall. You think about structural integrity. You think about how do you build that in? Where do the posts have to be? That's the thing that you rewire over and over. So I have a dream. Okay, fantastic. I have one question. What skills does your dream require you to obtain? Now you know what to do. Now you know how to spend your time. So even though it was this hotly debated thing, I decided I was going to believe in brain plasticity. Why? Welcome to one of the most important rules in my life. I chose to believe it not because I knew it was true. I chose to believe it because it was empowering. And I only allow myself to do and believe about myself things that are empowering. I think humans have an extraordinarily hard time determining what is true. You're something like 5 times more likely to believe something negative about yourself than you are something true. Your brain's job is to keep you alive. It is not to keep you thriving. So it's going to protect you from danger. It's going to send warning signals all the time. It's going to tell you that you're smaller than you really are so that you don't take that risk. And look, I don't think people have a moral obligation to do something great. I don't even know that my way of life is the best for everyone. I think you have to be really careful who you take advice from. And in the beginning of that intro, they took a snippet from a longer thing, and I want to give you the longer thing now. I don't know that the way that I live my life is the right way to live. Maybe just trying to find peace, calm, and a stress-free life would be better for you. All I know is if you want to be great, if you want to play on a world stage, I'm your man. And let me tell you what I've learned. You're going to pay an extraordinary price to become the person that you want to become. And it starts with having the dream, because you have to have clarity. You've got to know what you want. and I find that a lot of people fall down on this. They don't know what they want. They have some general sense. They'll say things like this: Tom, I know exactly what I want, man. I want to help people. Fantastic. In what way? How are you going to help them? How are you going to measure your success? There are so many ways to help people, and your job is to get really extraordinary at one of them. To me, that's like saying, Tom, I want to win a gold medal. Fantastic. In what? The Olympics? Yes, the Olympics. Great. Summer or winter? Summer. Awesome. Tennis or swimming? Swimming? Fantastic. Which event? Backstroke? The medley? Because until you know exactly which thing you want to be great at, you don't know what skills to acquire. And it all comes down to that. It is a relentless focus on skill acquisition. So Raul was saying that he wanted me to talk about the two poverties. There's financial poverty. I think everybody gets that. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the poverty of poor mindset. Now, this came because I worked in the inner cities a lot. And I big brothered for a kid for 8.5 years. He grew up in South Central Los Angeles. He was drug and alcohol impacted. He was adopted into an abusive single mother family. And watching him fail to escape his geography was heartbreaking for me. But I was too young and stupid to understand what he needed. Then, flash forward 15 years later, I have 3,000 employees. 1,000 of them grew up hard. Hard, man. Watching your sister be shot to death in your front lawn by an AK-47, holding your stepfather while he bleeds to death from a gunshot wound to the head, hiding under a car while your friend, who's about 8 inches from your face, bleeds to death because he's been shot in the stomach with a shotgun at point-blank range. That's hard. And I started asking this interview question because I'd put out on the streets that at Quest, because we believe that it doesn't matter who you are today, it only matters who you want to become and the price you're willing to pay to get there, that I would hire people even if they had felony convictions. So we had people lined up around the block just for an interview. It was bananas. And one of the most life-changing experiences I've ever had. And I remember asking people, a magic genie is about to show up. They're going to grant you one wish and one wish only. Can't wish to bring somebody back from the dead or cure cancer or anything like that. It's got to be for you. What do you wish for? Because I wanted to know what their selfish desire was. I wanted to know if they had that clarity. Did they know what they actually wanted from their life? Because I wanted to know if I could actually help them develop those skills or not. And I asked that question probably close to 300 times. I got the same answer every single time. What are the odds of that? About the 10th time I heard the answer, I actually thought my team was trying to punk me. I was like, this is impossible. How are people saying the same thing over and over and over? Now, admittedly, it was a job interview. I gave them the framing about what they couldn't ask for and all that. So I've narrowed down the world so it gets a little more plausible. But the answer was so horrifying to me that it gave birth to the company that I now run, which is impact theory, which is literally my theory on how to impact people at scale. Now, what I found so crazy was the magic genie that was going to show up. Everybody wanted to ask for the same thing. Anybody have a guess as to what it is? Say it again. I heard it. $1 million. This is a magic genie, boys and girls. And you ask for $1 million? You can't even buy a house in LA for $1 million. You could ask for $1 trillion. You could ask for a money printing machine that people always buy. You could ask for a gun that turns things into anything you want. And you ask for $1 million? I was literally aghast. I was like, this isn't happening. How is this possible? This is a failure of imagination on such a terrifying level that I don't even know what to do with it. So finally, I was like, the problem is their frame of reference. Their frame of reference is that is an impossible amount of money. They did, in my words, ask the magic genie for $1 trillion or a gun that shot something and turned it into whatever they wanted. They couldn't think any bigger than that. And that's when I was like, whoa. It was simply because I chose to believe I could get better at something. It was simply because I believed that my energies, if I put it into getting a skill, that I could actually get that skill. That sent me down this road. It was a very long road, but it was a road that took me from not being able to get out of bed to building a business that was really growing and impacting lives. In our first 3 years alone, we grew by 57,000% in manufacturing. This was not software. This was first you have bars that you're making in a kitchen that you rent by the hour, then you have 5,000 square feet, then 30,000 square feet, but it's somebody else's facility, then it's 50,000, 100,000, 300,000. It was about 330,000 square feet by the time I left. Because I decided, and I use that word very intentionally, I decided to believe, regardless of whether or not it was true, that I could adapt, I could grow, I could change, I could, quite simply, get any skill I wanted. Let me give you something to repeat. On a long enough timeline, you can beat anyone at anything. Here's the bad news. It's actually not true. But if you repeat that to yourself and you act as if it is true, the number of people that you will surpass that will look at you like, what are you doing? What were you born with? You've got something I don't have. And that's what people always say to me. They look at me now and they say, you're naturally talented. And I say, my own mother didn't think I was going to succeed. Now, my father-in-law, many a night, I spent panicking that he was going to be right, that it would prove to be true that his daughter would have been better off not marrying me. And that pushed me hard. And I always tell people, you want to spend 80% of your time in gratitude, in the beautiful things that you want to create, in where you're going and who you want to become and how well you're doing and how much you're growing. And that's insanely powerful. And if you spend 80% of your time there, you will live a wonderful life. But it is a fact of the human condition that in acute moments of pain, aggression is the only thing that's going to get you to the other side. They did a study. They had people submerge their arms in ice water, and they had them hold it there as long as they could until the pain was so intolerable that they had to take their arm out, and they found a baseline. And then they said to the next group, I want you to put your arm back in, but this time, right when you think that you have to take it out, I want you to get really angry. I want you to start swearing. I want you to get as much aggression and anger as you can. And they were able to keep it in for 30% longer. There is light and there is dark. And sometimes you're going to dip into that to find your way through. Like in the Matrix, what I'm saying today, I'm not promising that it's going to be easy. I'm simply saying that it's true. You can become whoever you want to become. And that's hard to face. It's hard to face the reality is that your life right now is a reflection of the choices you've made. Your life right now is not because of circumstance. Your life right now is not due to what your parents did or didn't do or the accident you were in or the person who betrayed you or the person that abused you. None of that is relevant. You are where you are because of the choices you've made and the skill set you've built. Period. End of story. Now, why is that the best news ever? Because it means you're in control. You've steered yourself to exactly this point. Now, you may not have been paying attention. You may not have had the clarity that you now know that you need if you want to end up in the exact place that you want to end up. But now that you take that control back and you recognize that you can go anywhere you want, become anyone you want to become, but you're going to have to put in the work, now you can decide whether you want to put in that work or not. And if you don't, that's fair enough. Because the real punchline of all of this, by the way to win this game called life is not money, it's not fame, it's not other people's adoration. It is quite simply what you think about yourself when you're by yourself. It's fulfillment. Fulfillment is working really hard to gain a set of skills that are of value to you, that allow you to serve not only yourself but others. If you do that, if you work really hard to become something, to have a power, building things, whatever the power is that you want, and then you put it to use in service of yourself and others, you put it to use in service of something bigger than you, then you'll have fulfillment. Then you'll have something that the ancient Greeks called techne. It's something that no one can take away from you. It's something born of a cold shower, of working out in the gym, of not eating the thing that you want, of getting out of bed immediately when it's time, getting up, studying, and practicing long after it stopped being fun. That's fulfillment. That's the thing that no one can take away from you. Now, I had the very good fortune of getting rich in a really sort of weird way. I didn't slowly, day by day, get more and more wealth. All of my wealth was in a company. And the company was worth over $1 billion, but I had a pretty normal bank account. And then one day, refresh on my banking app, and like that, I had a lot of commas and zeros. And it was really weird. And the thing that was super weird about it was I didn't feel any differently about myself. That person that everybody had accurately identified was going to fail, I'd changed. I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't think like that person anymore. I had totally different habits than that person had. All of my rituals and routines, they were completely different. The person that I saw looking back at me in the mirror was a very different person. So I'd already built that foundation of credibility with myself, of self-respect, of having a belief about who I was and who I wasn't. I knew where I was weak and I knew where I was strong, and I wasn't BSing myself about that. I had that clarity. So when the money hit and it didn't make me feel any differently about myself, I had this really weird realization. I always thought that when I got rich, I would have that feeling about myself that I had about other people growing up as a kid when they were rich, and I adored them, and I thought it was so cool, and I wanted to be that so badly that I thought I would feel that way about myself, and I didn't. In fact, true statement, I feel better about myself because I take a cold shower every morning than I do about myself because of the wealth that I've created. I feel better about myself for having created jobs than I do for creating wealth. I feel better about myself because I lost 60 pounds and I've kept it off for going on 10 years than I do for the worldly success. That's how I know, I'm telling you right now, the only thing that matters is how you feel about yourself when you are by yourself. And I always tell people, you don't know that I take a cold shower every morning. I could be lying to you. Maybe I've never taken a cold shower in my life. You never know. But I know. And so I live for the moment where I get to say this. Like this morning, I didn't want to take a cold shower. I have the chills right now. I did not want to take a cold shower. And I knew you guys would never know. But I knew I would know. And I knew how I would feel when I said that I feel good about myself for taking these cold showers. And I wanted to feel some kind of way about myself. And that I can tell you no matter what happens, because the struggle is guaranteed, the success is not. Burn that into your psyche. The struggle is guaranteed, the success is not, so you better be doing things every day that make you feel some kind of way about yourself. And you better be pursuing something that you believe in. You better have a lot of clarity about who you're trying to become, about what skills you're trying to get, and who you want to serve. You better have real clarity. So when my mother said I was going to fail, she was right. When my father-in-law said, I don't want you to marry my daughter, he was right. They had accurately identified who I was at that point. But 15 years later, my father-in-law flew to Los Angeles for the first time since we'd started the business. And I was walking him around the production floor. And 100,000+ square feet, tens of millions of dollars of equipment, something like 800 employees going around the floor, people addressing me, oh, Mr. Bilyeu, it's so good to see you. And I turned to my father-in-law and I said, Andreas, do you remember when you asked me how I was going to take care of your daughter? And he said, yes. And I said, how am I doing? And he just started to cry. And I realized in that moment that this was just an outward manifestation of a transformation that I'd been on for 15 years. And honestly, what he really cared about was his daughter was happy. His daughter was fulfilled. His daughter was in a relationship that was pushing her to be a better version of herself, that had unlocked something in her, and she believed that she could be anything. She could do anything. And that ultimately is, when I talk about poverty of mindset, when I talk about my mission in life is to end generational poverty, I'm talking about all of that. I'm talking about one simple thing, that you believe that putting in energy to acquiring skills will be worth it because you will be rewarded with a skill that will allow you to do something. Not to be cool, not to be on Instagram. It's going to actually let you do something. And when you have clarity of purpose, you know what you want to do, and you go out every day and you get those skills, then you really can transform. All right, I'm going to end it there because I really do want to take questions. And unless Raul tackles me, we've got 15 minutes.
So you want to end
Oh, he-
Poverty.
Poverty, sorry. What skill do you need to learn?
So for me, it's very simple. Well, it's actually not simple. I understand it very well. So here's how it goes. With my skill set, with my passions, what I'm going to have to do is be able to influence one of three things, because mindset is determined by the following three: who your parents are, where you grow up, and how your friends think. I can't influence who your parents are. I can't influence where you grow up, but I can actually influence what your friends think by changing the culture. Now, humans, the way that they assimilate truly disruptive information is through narrative. So I knew with my skill set, that was a great place to be. Now, I wish I were into music, because I think music really defines what's cool in society, and kids tend to follow whatever is cool. Unfortunately, that is not my gift or my interest, but film is another massive way. And so storytelling, being able to give people a different story, and I'll give you an example that will hopefully broaden out the way that you conceptualize storytelling. Right now, all of you are telling yourselves a story about who you are. I tell myself a story about who I am, and my story goes exactly like this: I am the learner. Now, I learned that lesson the hard way. I used to think of myself as smart. I used to think of myself as needing to be right, to be valuable. And so I found myself, when I finally got into an entrepreneurial environment, I found myself fighting for ideas because they were mine. So even if I knew they were the right idea, or the wrong idea, I would keep fighting for them because my ego needed that. I needed to win. I needed to feel smart. And so here I was working with these two guys that were clearly smarter than me. And it's funny how when I say that, oftentimes people are like, no, everybody's different. It's not they were. No, they were smarter than me. They were able to process data faster than I was. That's just true. And so rather than trying to hide or shuck and jive, I just faced it. Okay, they can process raw data faster than I can. But I can do other things. So let me figure out what lane I want to go in. What are the things that I want to learn? And so when I began to realize that what I defined my self-esteem around mattered, everything began to change. So I stopped thinking of myself as smart, and I started thinking of myself as the learner. If you guys know Nassim Taleb talks about being anti-fragile. So things that are robust, things that are strong or tough, they're all still defined by their breaking point. Something that is anti-fragile is something that the more you batter into it, the stronger it becomes. So it does not weaken over time. It actually gets better over time. And the only personality trait that I could think of, the only self-identity, the only thing I could build my self-esteem around that I saw as being anti-fragile was I'm the learner. Because if somebody comes to me and says, Tom, you're stupid, previously that would have devastated me, especially if I respected them. That would have been, I would have lost days, weeks, months trying to rebuild my self-esteem. And by the way, we all have this saying called the psychological immune system. The psychological immune system are the lies that you tell yourself to make you feel good about who you are, okay? It can be a friend for sure, and people that are happiest have the highest levels of self-delusion. Read that research, it's crazy. But they're not gonna be the people that actually go the farthest and do the most stuff. So I began to change that. I started thinking of myself as the learner. So if you tell me that I'm stupid, rather than it spiraling me out of control, I go, awesome, Mark. In what way am I stupid? Because you may now remove a scale from my eyes, and I can actually see what I need to do to get better. And here's the thing. When your self-esteem is tied up in being the learner, then you actually get that dopamine rush of like, I'm awesome when you go, I'm gonna stare nakedly at my inadequacies. I'm gonna totally lock in on you. I actually want to know in what way I'm stupid. I really want you to tell me. And even if you're trying to hurt me, this is what I always tell people. If somebody throws a rock at your head, it's gonna suck. And your every instinct is gonna be to put up your defenses, to deflect that, to get rid of it somehow. But I'm telling you, the only thing people are able to throw at you are nuggets of gold. Why? Because they're gonna throw something at you. If they really wanna hurt you, they're gonna pick something true. They're gonna pick something that really cuts. I have the chills again. And that's what they're gonna throw at you. And if you let it smack you in the head, then it falls at your feet. You can pick it up. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it was absolutely no fun, and it will hurt every time for sure. It does hurt less over time, but now you have that nugget of gold. Somebody gave you that insight that it is so hard to give ourselves. We are so blind to ourselves sometimes that we need that input from people. But if you're trying to deflect it, if you're letting the psychological immune system kick in, you're never going to get there. So I switch over to the learner. I realize that human beings are truly transformed through narrative. I understood the narrative I was telling in my own life. I switched it over to being the learner. It changed my entire life. So now I ask myself, how do I use film and television to make sure that nary a human on this planet can grow up without encountering a growth mindset? Because the reality is, I didn't have it because I didn't know what it was. And as soon as somebody said, oh, by the way, the brain really can change, you're not trapped forever, Tom. Just because you're talentless today doesn't mean you have to be talentless tomorrow. It's not about what you're born with. Don't worry about genetics. Focus on one thing. Hard work pays off. So that's the skill set I have to give, telling stories. Is that a question? Okay, I take cold showers because cold showers suck. So, but that's exactly why. I mean, that's one of the reasons. So I'm going to really fast rattle off the truth of why I do it. If you don't know who Wim Hof is, look him up. Wim Hof's wife committed suicide, and it left him broken in a way he couldn't explain. This is in Amsterdam. He's staring at a frozen pond. He is just lost in grief. And he said something about the frozen pond was calling to him. He smashes through the ice, he crawls inside, and he just sits, holding his breath underwater. And he says when he came out, he just felt different, and he felt connected to something that he didn't before. So he goes in this whole thing of cold exposure, and he begins exposing himself in the most insane ways possible, and he can maintain his core body temperature. And people are like, nope, it's not true. This guy's BSing you. He's making claims. None of it's real. So he said, cool, let's do it in laboratory conditions. Put sensors, put cameras on me, submerge me in a bucket of ice up to his neck. It's crazy. It's see-through. You can literally see the ice. The dude is in ice. And he can maintain his body temperature even to a point long past where most people die of hypothermia. You can tell him, heat up your hand, and he'll heat up just his hand. They said, all right, this is crazy, but it's just temperature. You probably couldn't do something like, let me inject you with E. coli, and you shut it down. Because he kept saying, I can control my nervous system. And they're like, it's called the autonomic nervous system for a reason. You don't have conscious control over it. He said, yes, I do. They inject him with it in laboratory conditions, and he activates his immune system, and it shuts down E. coli. They take his blood out. Up to 4 hours later, his blood, when he gives it that command, can still shut it down. He swears it's because of cold exposure and breathing exercises. I can't vouch for it. I can just tell you, when he says take cold showers, I start taking cold showers. So he said, I had him on the show. He said, take cold showers. I started taking them. For me, the thing is, if you know David Goggins says, do something every day that sucks. David Goggins believed that he was the weakest man God ever created, and he was abused and beaten as a child. And I mean, his story is so extraordinary that even trying to encapsulate it, he's the only person to go through, I think, the 4 hardest military trainings. He did the SEALs. He did their BUDS class 3 times, which is crazy. He's done Hell Week 3 times. He finished Hell Week twice. He did Delta training, he did Ranger school, and then something in the Air Force. I mean, just unbelievable, ultra-endurance athlete, all this stuff. And he says, look, I'll let you decide whether I'm the toughest man alive, but he said it gave me something to aim at, and I feel pretty good. And by the way, he ends up setting these endurance records, sets a pull-up record, all with a poker chip-sized hole in his heart. And sickle cell trait. So it's like, his whole thing is no excuses. So I have this weird phobia of the cold. So I've struggled with anxiety most of my adult life, massive crippling anxiety, right? Which some people are, even my own wife was like, but you get up and speak in front of people. How can it be that you have anxiety? But I have had to do an inhuman amount of work, right? To get to the point where I could get on stage. Because there was a time in my life where my wife asked me to tell a story to 5 people. It was my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and a friend. And I couldn't do it. I was so out of breath and so freaking out. That was in a living room. Now I can speak on stages, 2,000 people, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I still, even today, someone just now backstage asked me, do you still get nervous before talking? The answer is yes. But I have tools and strategies and things that I do to make sure that I can get there. And one of them is I have this crippling fear of the cold because it reminds me physiologically of anxiety. It's exactly how it feels for me. Think about how you feel when you're cold. You get a little shivery and all that. That's how I feel when I'm anxious. So for me, there's no difference between am I cold or am I really anxious? And so I thought, this is probably a good way for me to get better at that, to not be so worried and paralyzed about going up and speaking, is to get really calm. Now, when the cold water hits you, you go into fight or flight like that. It's crazy. And your body's just screaming, get out of this, man. You're about to die. I just know it. And then you realize, wait a second. I can squelch that urgency immediately. I control that. It is so weird. Like when that water hits you and you're like, and your brain is just like, dude, you've got to get out right now. And you just go, no. You can, even when I just said it now, I had that same sense of just like release, of relaxing. But you have to practice it. You have to do it, right? Thinking about it helps, it really does. But doing it is just way more powerful. So every day, I get in the shower and I full blast cold it. And by the way, I wear a continuous glucose monitor so that I can track like what affects me. If you want to know if a cold shower actually affects you, I'll drop my blood sugar by like 20 points in 5 minutes. It's insane. And you can just see it on the graph because your body really goes into panic mode and it's just sucking the glucose out of the bloodstream to get it into the muscles to be ready to shiver, to fight, flight, whatever. It's crazy, but it's so powerful and it toughens your mind. That's the reality. And when you do stuff like that every day, you begin, one, to earn credibility with yourself, right? Like when I hit that cold water today on a day I really did not want to do it, that's when I'm like, and that's why you're you, man. Like that's why you get to feel good about you. And so, like, I don't live in fear of failing. Like, impact theory, our vision is so big. We want to build the next Disney. That even if we do it, which statistically speaking, we're not going to, there's only one for a reason. And even if we do, how long is it going to take? 70 years? Am I even going to be alive in 70 years? I don't know. But so how do I have the audacity to go after that, right? Because I hit the cold water. Because I know that I'm going to stick with it. I know when it gets hard, I'm going to keep going because I do hard things every day.